Hey y'all, sorry that I'm out again. Today we're going to be talking about proofs. This is one of the more complicated concepts in geometry, just simply because it feels like you're going to be stating the obvious, and that is what you're going to be doing, but it's in a specific set of or a specific order and given specific reasons. So we're going to be proving that triangles are congruent, and we're going to use those triangle congruents that we talked about in our other notes. So you might want to have those out in front of you, side, angle, all of that stuff. And that's how we're going to prove these. You can read this definitions here. You can look at this example. So essentially, if you look up here at this triangle, we're given an angle, and a side, and then an angle, and a side. And angle, side is one of our triangle congruence theorems. So these are going to be congruent. How do we know? Well, they told us angle M was congruent to angle Y using these markings here. And they told us that angle L was congruent to angle Z, again, using these markings here to indicate as much. And then lastly, they told us side KL was congruent to side AZ, again, using this little singular marker here. So we can prove that these triangles are congruent. Again, remember that naming is important here, and the order that we name them matters. So K corresponds to A, L corresponds to Z, and M corresponds to Y, and those meaning those are the congruent parts. And again, we can prove these are congruent by angle, side. Okay, so let's look at the information we have over here and decide if we can prove these triangles are congruent. So we're given angle Z is congruent to angle N. So I'm just going to start writing that out. Angle Z is congruent to angle N. How do I know? It was given to me, again, with those markings there. And then I know that side ZA is congruent to side NM. So ZA is congruent to NM. And how do I know that? Well, they gave it to me. Again, that's going to be given because they told me. And then lastly, I know that this side M is congruent to this, or rather angle. That angle M is congruent to angle A. Angle M is congruent to angle A. And again, that information was given with the markings on the triangle. So what do we know? We know LMN is congruent to BAZ. And how do we know? We know because what we have is angle, side, angle, and that is one of my congruence statements. So these triangles are congruent. How do I know? Angle, side, angle. Start with the angle, then the side, and lastly the angle. Okay, looking at the markings here, we can see side, another side, and a third side. So yes, obviously, if we know all the sides are congruent, then definitely the triangles must be congruent. Because all their side lengths are the same. So that makes sense, right? So then we just have to actually list this information out. CB is going to be congruent, that side CB is going to be congruent to side OP. Again, keeping those parts in the correct order. And the congruent symbol is an equal sign with a little tilde over it. That was bad over there. Okay, and then we know, again, that's given with the markings. We know that CD is congruent to ON. Again, given because of the markings they gave us. And then lastly, we know that BD is congruent to PN. Oh, that's not a P. Try again. PN. And that means that these triangles are congruent. Again, lining up congruent parts. N is congruent to D. O is congruent to C. And P is congruent to B. And the reason we know these triangles are congruent is because of our side congruence statement. Okay, anytime you see this right angle here, you should be thinking about hypotenuse leg. Again, that all that requires is a right triangle, which we have, the hypotenuse, which we also have, and a leg. So yes, these are going to be congruent because of hypotenuse leg. So down here, the reason will be hypotenuse leg. But again, we still need 3 pieces of information. One of them is going to be that we have a right triangle. So I can't remember how they do that in your drop-down menu on Delta Math, but essentially we need to say that triangle DFE is a right triangle, or somehow indicating, or probably actually we can say, again, I'm not sure how Delta Math does this for your drop-down menu, but essentially we need to say that angle F is congruent to angle P, and that they are equal to 90 degrees. Something indicating that we have a right angle here. So however Delta Math does that in the drop-down menu is what you're looking for there. But essentially we need to say that these are right triangles. That's one of our pieces of information for hypotenuse leg. Then we want to say that side DE is congruent to side SR, those being the hypotenuse of hypotenuse leg. And then lastly, DF is congruent, side DF is congruent to side SP, again, keeping those corresponding parts together. All right. On this next one, we have side, angle, side. That is a congruent statement. So these are congruent, and it's going to be by side, angle, side. So again, this is going to be a side, angle, and a side to match what I'm saying is the congruent statement I'm using. So first we'll do LK, side LK is congruent, again keeping corresponding parts together. L is the congruent to X, so X, Y here. And then we're going for the angle that they told us. Angle K is congruent to angle Y. Again, that's given by the markings. And then lastly, we want to do our last side, which would be KJ is congruent to YZ. And again, all of these parts, the order matters here. So these are congruent triangles by side, angle, side, and lining up the corresponding incongruent parts. Okay, last example. This is a side angle. Notice if you tried to go this way, angle, side, or if we tried to go side, angle, side, if that's your instinct, you would skip an angle and a side. You're not allowed to do that. So this is in fact angle, side, side, and that, if you imagine the acronym for that, ASS, is a potty word that we are not going to be putting on our math. So these triangles are not necessarily congruent, and that's because if you think about it, this leg over here is not being pinned. There's no angle here or angle here pinning it, so we don't know if it's over there or possibly if it swings and goes a different location. We don't know that it is in fact only one triangle because that angle is not pinning it anywhere. So that would not be congruent. All right, let's look at this next example over here. We're given 2 angles. If we're given 2 angles, we by definition know this third angle because of triangle sum theorem. So we actually know that all 3 angles are congruent. So that would be like angle, angle, angle. But that is also not enough information. Because if you think about it, if we think about just the easiest examples, an equilateral triangle or an equiangular triangle, right, where all the angles are 60 degrees, could be really small or really big, and all of these angles would be 60 on both these triangles, but obviously they are not congruent. They are not the same size and shape. So 3 angles is enough to tell that triangles are similar, but not enough to tell if triangles are congruent. And that is our lesson for today. Make sure you write those notes down and work on your Delta Math. Hopefully I'll be back tomorrow.